So to cast some light on the provenance of these quotes, we're joined by James McGrory. He's director of Open Britain. They released the video. Welcome to the Sunday Politics. On your video, it features 12 statements from Leave campaigners hinting that they wanted to remain in the single market. How many of these 12 statements were made during the referendum campaign?
I don't know, but some of Dan Hanan's were.
Well, actually, not one was made during the referendum campaign. Indeed, only 2 of the 12 statements were recorded after royal assent had been given to the referendum. Only 1 was made this year before the referendum.
But throughout the campaign, Leave campaigners lauded the Norwegian model. And as you know, Norway are in the single market, but not in the EU. In fact, the Leave campaign went out of their way not to be pinned down on a specific trading arrangement they wanted to see in the future with Europe. When the Treasury modelled the different models, it was the EEA or a free trade agreement or a WTO.
I understand that, but isn't it interesting, and does it not undermine your case, that none of the 12 statements on your video were made during the campaign itself, when people were giving really serious thought to such matters?
Well, the Leave campaign weren't giving really serious thought to such matters. They did not set out the future trading model that they wanted to see with the European Union.
You cannot produce a single video of somebody saying we should stay in the single market from the Leave side during the campaign.
This isn't an exhaustive list. Throughout the campaign, Daniel Hannan talked about the Norwegian model as being a future option.
I mean, one of the comments you used from Nigel Farage dates back to 2009. When we didn't even know if we'd have a referendum or not. Does it not stretch credibility to go back to the time when Gordon Brown was Prime Minister?
I think the point stands. The overall point we're trying to make, this is not supposed to be an exhaustive list of all the options that the Leave campaign...
You would choose the best, wouldn't you?
Well, I think when Daniel Hannan, who's been described as the intellectual godfather of the Leave movement, is saying absolutely no one is talking about threatening our place in the single market, I think it's legitimate to point out that the Leave campaign never came forward with a clear argument.
We highlighted in the graphic a few of the quotes you picked out from Leave campaigners over time, none during the referendum. Do you think that you fully encapsulated accurately their arguments?
Well, I don't think in a 90-second video you can talk about the full spectrum of opinion that they have. Some of them do want to leave the single market. Some of them want to be like Norway. Some of them want to seek a free trade agreement. Others want to default onto World Trade Organization tariffs. What I'm saying is there is a massive spectrum of opinion, even within the Leave campaign.
I understand, but what I was asking was whether you have portrayed them accurately. So let's have a listen to the clip that you used on Owen Paterson first.
Only a madman would actually leave the market.
This is what he then went on to say after saying only a madman would leave the market.
Only a madman would actually leave the market. It's not the EU, which is a political organisation, delivering the prosperity and buying our goods. It's the market, it's the members of the market, and we will carry on trading with the market. I mean, are we really suggesting that the 5th largest economy in the world is not to come to a satisfactory trading arrangement with the EU? Are we going to be like Sudan and North Korea? I mean, it's ludicrous, this idea that we're going to leap off a cliff into a dark space. We will carry on trading.
So what he meant when he said only a madman would leave the market was not leaving membership, which is your implication, but that we would, of course, continue to trade. We would continue to have access.
Any country in the world can have access. What the Leave campaigners suggested is that our trade would continue uninterrupted. In fact, they're still at it today. David Davis used the phrase uninterrupted at the dispatch box recently.
But you misrepresented him, didn't you, by saying only a madman would leave the single market, then stopped it there, because he goes on to say that, of course, we won't leave in the sense of continuing to have access.
I don't think he was talking about access. He's there talking about membership.
He doesn't use the word membership at all. He talks about we're going to carry on trading with it. We won't leap off. We'll carry on trading.
Anybody can trade with the EU. It's the terms on which you trade that's important. And Leave campaigners, and Paterson is a classic example of this, suggest that we can trade completely as we do now. The government are saying we can trade without bureaucratic impediments and tariff-free. That's what the government
will make up their mind. Let's listen to the clip that you used of Matthew Elliott. He was the chief executive of Vote Leave. This is what you had him say.
When it comes to the Norwegian option, the EEA option, I think that it might be initially attractive for some business people.
So you then cut him off there. But this is what he went on to say in that same clip. Let's listen to that.
When it comes to the Norwegian option, the EEA option, I think that it might be initially attractive for some business people, but then again for voters who are increasingly concerned about migration in the EU, they'd be very concerned that it allows free movement of people to continue.
Again, you misrepresented him, didn't you? He said the Norwegian model has attractions, but there are real problems if it involves free movement of people, which it does. But you cut that bit out.
I challenge anyone to represent them accurately because they took such a range of opinions. I don't know what we're supposed to do. Some of them
you're
said...
misrepresenting. That's what you're doing.
He there is saying that the Norwegian option is attractive to business. I understand why it is.
But he then says, but
it might not be attractive to voters.
People would be concerned if it allowed free movement of people. You took that out.
And you're suggesting this is somehow a definitive position that we're now going to have to take...
No, I'm just suggesting that you're distorting. Let's see what Nigel Farage said. This is what you had Mr Farage saying.
On D+1, we'll find ourselves part of the European Economic Area and with a free trade deal.
And this is what he then went on to say in that same clip that you didn't run.
There is absolutely nothing to fear in terms of trade from leaving the European Union, because on D+1 we'll find ourselves part of the European Economic Area and with a free trade deal. And we should use our membership of the EEA as a holding position from which we can negotiate as the European Union's biggest export market in the world as good a deal. My goodness me, if Switzerland can have one, we can have an even better one.
So there again, he says not that we should stay in the single market as a member, but that we stay in the EEA as a transition until we negotiate something. I mean, the whole clip is online. How did you think you would get away with this distortion?
It's not a distortion. The whole point of the clip is to point out, or the clips, is to point out they don't have a definitive position. He is there arguing for membership of the single market.
No, he's not. No,
for
he's
a
not.
Transitional period.
For a transitional period.
Well, how long does that go on? What does he then want to achieve?
Not very quickly, but he's not saying we should stay members of the single market, and you didn't let people see what he went on to say. You gave the impression he wanted to stay in the single market.
It wouldn't be a video then, it would be a 7-week-long lecture. They took so many positions, and the idea now that they were clear with people that we should definitely leave the single market, I think is fictitious.
But you are trying to make out that they all had one position, which was to remain members of the single market.
We are trying to...
And when you see the full clips, that's not what they're saying.
We are trying to make out it's clear that there is no mandate to leave the single market. The idea that the Leave campaign spoke with unanimity and clarity of purpose, and throughout the whole campaign said, we'll definitely leave the single market, is just not true. That is the whole point of the video.
We showed in the montage of the video just before we came, we showed the then Prime Minister, the then Chancellor, Boris Johnson, Michael Gove being categorical that if you vote to leave the EU, you vote to leave membership of the single market. What bit of that didn't you understand?
Under duress, they occasionally said that they wanted...
Well, they all said it.
Some of them wanted to leave the single market. I don't see when all the other promises they made, whether £350 million for the NHS, whether a VAT cut on fuel...
You can't produce a single quote of any of these people saying we should remain a member.
Daniel Hannan has constantly praised the Norwegian model. Norway are a member of the single market.
One final question. I mean, you spent the referendum campaign criticising Vote Leave for misrepresenting and lying, and many people thought that they did. Having seen all this, many people will conclude that you're now the biggest liars.
I think it's perfectly reasonable to point out that the Leave campaigns didn't have a clear position on our future trading relationship with Europe. That's all this video does. It doesn't say we've definitely got to stay in the single market. It merely says the Leave campaigns don't have a mandate to drag us out of our biggest trading partner.
Well, now people have seen the full quotes and context. Our viewers will make up their mind. James McGrory, thank you.